reality is all that I know. She's over me. She's over me. She comes in with her hypnotic dance. She holds me here with only a glance. She's over me. She's over me. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, welcome to the Paranormal Portal, our Saturday night edition. Thank you guys so much for joining us. As always, it's a great pleasure to see you guys. Thank you so much for being here. We got a great show lined up for you guys tonight. Of course, as always, every Paranormal Portal is great, but tonight's a special night. We got a wonderful guest going to be joining us here in just a few moments, but before we get into that, I just got to let you know I'm not here alone. I got my good friend and co-host sitting right here next to me, and he's unmuted already. So
Hey,
I'm on the game, Don.
how is? Well, that's thank you. I think I need to buy him a cookie or something. I don't know.
I remembered my buttons.
Yes, okay, a donut. Anyhow, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
You know, I suck. I missed yesterday. I'm sorry. I just suck.
Do you need to?
I need a moment, please.
Okay. All right. We'll just have a little support group for you. You don't suck, Don. As far as I understand, anyway.
Whoa.
Hey. But on the top of the show tonight, I wanted to say a special thank you to one of our listeners, and the person I'm speaking to specifically is Taco Violator in the YouTube chat. He's been doing some amazing stuff for us here on the portal. And Don, you want to?
Oh, yeah. It's over here, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
That's where I put it.
So this guy is an incredibly talented guy, and he has taken it upon himself to. Oh God, it really doesn't show up, does it?
Yeah. No, it's because it's.
Let's put it back. There you go. It's a steel paranormal portal cutout. It's like plasma cut, powder coated.
Here, maybe I should do it here.
Yeah, I don't know. Is there like something?
Hold on. Let me turn that light. Hold on.
Okay. Yeah, just hit the slider. There you
There
go.
we go.
Look at that. Look at that, boys and girls. Is that not amazing?
That is it. This thing is amazing. It's he cut it out. Oh, there we go.
So we're going to backlight that, and it's going to be showcased on the wall behind in the studio here. But that was just really cool. Took it upon himself to make that, and did an amazing job. We are just absolutely honored and humbled by that. And Don, what else did he send?
Oh, he sent me a box. Never mind. No, but he sent me this really cool cuff. It's really cool. It's leather. It's got. You're gonna have to.
It says Longbeard.
It says Longbeard on it, but yeah, it's a wrist cuff. The thing is just awesome.
It's handcrafted,
Yes.
so very, very cool. And I mean, he took it upon himself to do that for us. So thank you, brothers, so much. I'm really excited to hang this sign behind us on the wall. I'm gonna have to change some camera angles, of course, but it's just beautiful. Could you put this back, brother?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
but
but
it's huge. I mean, what is this? This has got to be like 8-gauge steel and then powder coated.
It's powder coated. Yeah, it's just amazing.
Hey, it's 8 pounds, he said?
Yeah, I think it's 8 pounds is what he said. Yeah. But thank you, brother. That was really
Thing's
cool.
amazing.
And we are absolutely honored. I don't know if he's in the chat. I hope
Yes,
he
he
is.
is. He's
Okay,
here.
good. All right, good.
Yeah, he was here, unless he stepped away. Then in that case, bad on you.
He's too shy. But, ladies and
That's
gentlemen,
awesome.
tonight we are welcoming to the show a special guest. The gentleman joining us tonight has joined me on the podcast before. We had an epic discussion. And if you're not familiar with the podcast, you would have missed that. But the good news is he's here now on our YouTube stream to join us. I'd like to welcome to the show Mr. Tyus, who is a paranormal author. He's a former paranormal investigator and researcher, a great guy. Welcome to the show, Al.
Hey, it's good to be back. Thanks.
It's great to see you and actually see you, because this is the first time I think I have seen you, other than your pictures on your site. But Al, you wrote the Project Rabbit Hole, and prior to
Yes,
that,
sir.
you wrote Last Call on the Potomac. These are incredible books. I haven't read much of either of them, but I got to tell you, the pieces that I've read, and of course in talking with you, I'm absolutely blown away by what you've done, and I like the way that you are kind of rediscovering these things in a lot of ways and giving it really some critical thought. And you've come up with some really interesting viewpoints. This has been a labor of love for you for sure, huh?
It has. It actually has. It was a really good feeling when I was done with it, because I had this on my mind for so many years. And then when I actually wrote it, when people say like, oh, it takes years to write a book. And for me, it took about 4 months to write the whole thing before I went to my copy editor and eventually went to print. It took only about 4 months. And I just, every night I would come home from my regular job, and it would just kind of like flow out. A whole chapter or so would just flow out of it. And I was kind of amazed at how it was just coming out like that, and the research was there. The hardest thing really was to footnote, of course, because I'm very meticulous with footnotes and things, because I want people to know where I got stuff from. Like the biggest thing is a source. Like, well, where'd you get that from? That's not true. And I could go like, it's right here in the footnote. So, don't question me, question a source, and I went to a military graduate school, and they really drilled that into me about sourcing everything. And so that's one of the things I'm really, really neurotic about with it. But so that was what kind of took the longest. But a lot of the material was my experiences, and a lot of it was the information that's out there that backed up my experiences.
Now, could you take a couple minutes and go through what your experiences are?
Yeah, when I was actively investigating, it was really early for, I guess you could say, the field, because I started around 99, 2000. Now, you think about it, back then, we didn't have smartphones. Very few people actually had cellular phones back then. We still had those big clunky VHS tapes that we used to record, and the cameras were all, we had digital cameras, but I remember very specifically when we would come back from investigation, I would have to go to the pharmacy and get the pictures developed
Right.
onto a disc and upload the floppy onto the computer. I mean, that's how it was back then, and things were kind of different then with it. And I was doing a lot of investigations because there weren't a lot of groups in the area back then. This was before the big reality TV explosion came up.
Right.
And it was before, really before the big internet explosion too. The internet was still relatively new in 99, 2000s, around there as well.
Right.
So we had a lot of cases that were going on, and we were going on like sometimes it was 2 cases a night. I had to split my group up.
Wow.
And send one group to one case and one group to another. And we had this great diner up the street from me, and we would all meet at that diner and just kind of just discuss all the cases like that. And I kind of think of that as the good old days with
Sure.
it, and things began to change with it because I just started noticing that the cases were changing. The cases were getting kind of darker. Like people were getting hurt on a lot of cases. People were getting sick. There was a lot of fatigue with clients. For example, there was anemia. There were a lot of health issues that I started noticing clients had. And I even had a couple of them die from mysterious ways like that, which I actually wrote about those in my book. And I started asking myself, is this dangerous?
Yeah.
And the answer I had started to say to myself, well, yes. And I started asking myself, well, if it's dangerous, then why are you doing it?
Right.
And I really had to ask myself that question, like, well, why am I doing it? Because I am a researcher. I've always been a researcher. And I just started noticing that with a lot of the cases that I was working on, the patterns weren't falling into it being, a ghost. Because nowadays, it's ghost and paranormal almost seems simultaneous.
Right.
When somebody says, "Oh, I'm looking for paranormal activity," really, you're looking for evidence of a ghost.
Right.
And even ask them about it. Well, what does that mean? Oh, I'm looking for a ghost. I think I said on the last episode, I saw a meme one time of this Victorian woman, and she was playing with a divination board, and this big spirit showed up behind her and said, "I'm from the seventh dimension. I can answer any questions you have about the universe." And she's just saying, "Quiet, I'm looking for ghosts." And I started to realize that we're not alone in all of this, and there are a lot of other things out there, and there's a good chance that what we're investigating are not the disembodied remnants of dead people. And when I started to think about that, especially by looking at other cultures particularly, and realizing that what we're doing right now happens to be our culture, our timeline, and this moment. 100 years from now, this is going to be completely different. 100 years ago, it was completely different. This is just where we are right now with it. So we're kind of like in this one spot with it. So what that means is we really don't really know what they are. We just make assumptions with what they are. And with that being said, I started to look at my cases and look at the things that were going on. And I started looking through folklore and other sources and other cultures and things like that. And I started coming across a lot of things that I didn't really like that could have been the source of the activity. Ruling out, of course, the logical stuff like a leaky pipe or a squeaky door or those kinds of things.
Oh, sure.
But other things that I was having experiences with that my clients are having experiences with, I started to realize this is not a haunting that involves a dead person. Nobody died in the house, for example. The house is relatively new. It's not doing what a typical ghost would be doing. These things are very different. And I started to realize that. And I started to put it all together, and I started thinking, well, maybe there's a lot more to the concept of non-human entities, elementals, jinn. I don't like the term demons. I mention it in my book, but I think that to actually have a demon in an environment is relatively rare.
Yes.
But I think that you can have other things that are going on besides ghosts. And I started thinking about my cases and things that were going on with it, and how many of my cases involved witchcraft and the occult. How many cases involved people messing with divination? How many cases were involving even flat out Satanism were involved in some of them, and medieval styles of magic that were going on, and all these different things that were happening. And I began to realize that all this stuff is changing with the internet, for one thing, because now all the old grimoires and the old books and the old things that we were never able to have access to before because they were hidden in libraries all over the world, now we have access to this stuff. and everybody has access to this stuff. More people can summon an entity now than ever before because they have the materials to do it now with it. And more people can have an understanding about this. So there's this great knowledge boom of what these things could possibly be. But paranormal investigators are still kind of like, I'm looking for ghosts, you know? And I started to offer non-human entity training. And I did this for my team because I started to tell my group at the time, you're going to be up against something that's not going to be a human spirit at some point.
Right.
And you need to understand this. And my team were kind of split on it. Like a few of them were kind of like, that's kind of cool and interesting. And other ones were like, this is the most ridiculous thing I could possibly be sitting here for, you know? And I had a couple of women in my group, and they had kind of the eye rolls, and they snickered together, and they kind of played off each other and things like that. And at the end of the training, I always gave things out for people, and I frequent Louisiana very frequently for my research. And I gave out these little souvenir voodoo dolls, about 3 inches tall.
Nice.
And I passed them out, and one of the women got one of them, and she went home. And that night, she called me in absolute hysterics, and I said, "What is your problem? what is going on here? You certainly weren't like this earlier." And she said, "I came home, and I took that little voodoo doll, and I put it up in the cupboard because it has feathers on it, and I have a cat. The cat will destroy it."
Sure.
So I put it in the kitchen cupboard on an upper shelf, and I closed the cupboard door, and I went on the couch and I took a nap. I fell asleep. I woke up. The thing was sitting on the coffee table staring at me.
Oh, jeez.
And what I said to her, I just said in all seriousness, I said, sometimes the spirits don't like it when you mock them.
Oh.
And she never mocked them again
Yeah.
after that. And so it was kind of a funny situation for me because by this time I knew there was more than just ghosts because, you know, things follow paranormal investigators home all the time.
Right.
It happens all the time. That's not a ghost. A ghost is confined to a particular area for a particular amount of time. You really think that if you're investigating, let's say you're investigating the White House, just as an example, and something follows you home from the White House and it starts knocking things off your shelf, you really think Lincoln decided to come home with you?
Well, probably not.
You know, no. What it is that a lot of times haunted environments may contain ghosts, but they also may contain other things that are in those places. And that's what I started to really research. There are a lot of other entities that love to inhabit abandoned places, for example. Jinn in particular, they love abandoned asylums. They love abandoned prisons, hospitals. For some reason, they really like to congregate into places where there has been human death. I'm not sure what the reason is behind this, but if you talk to anybody who is from the Islamic faith and they know about jinn, they'll tell you that they tend to hang around places where things have died, where people have died, especially like that. So I never liked going to those places. I never liked going to asylums, prisons, hospitals. And there are people who I was kind of shocked when I saw that they actually sell tickets to these places that people can go to investigate.
Right.
Yeah.
I was kind of like, you actually want to go to a place like this? And I was kind of stunned by it. And one time I did get a call from a woman who I was kind of friends with because she ran a paranormal group out in California. And she called me and she was absolutely freaking out with me on the phone. And when I was on the phone with her, it's going to sound kind of weird, but maybe some of your audience may understand this.
Okay.
I got a flash in my head of something that I thought may have been messing with her. It could have just been like, I don't know, just a thought or whatever.
Sure.
But what I saw in my head was not human. And I told her, I said, you have to get rid of this thing. And I told her what she needed to do to get rid of it. And I said, don't go back.
Yeah.
Don't go back. And it took her a couple of weeks since she did end up getting rid of this thing. And right after that, she went running right back to the place. And then I was like, "Oh, mon Dieu," So what can you do
Yeah.
after that? You just have to say like, well, you're on your own now,
Right.
like that. You're on your own. If you have to look at it this way. If you walk into a place, like let's say you walk into a bar and a bunch of guys there beat the crap out of you.
Right.
Are you going to go back to that bar in 2 weeks?
But they got
You
great
know,
wings.
but
Yeah, I
but
hear you.
there's something about the paranormal investigator, certain ones that just say like, yeah, I'm going to go back, and have this happen again and this stuff and everything, and why? Because, well, I want to have some activity and some evidence of something to
Right.
happen with that. And that's what it is all about nowadays. It's all about,
Hmm.
getting the evidence from what they allegedly say. Now, with that being said, I want to talk about one of my earliest cases that's a prime example of how something can happen.
Sure.
I used to investigate this old, very old log cabin that I had with some friends of mine. They became my friends, and they lived way out in Virginia, way out in the sticks. In fact, there are still some places there that don't have indoor plumbing. That's how
Wow.
bad it is out there. It's still like that. Maybe not now, but back then it was.
Sure.
Anyways, and what happened was this was a really nice family, and the husband and wife would always send their kids out to relatives when we came over, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
But they always invited over guests to the house when we were there.
Oh.
And it really started to drive me crazy because we'd be investigating and they'd all be sitting around the kitchen table and did you find anything? Did you find anything? And whenever they were there, I had to like throw everybody out of the house to do like, sweeps and electronic voice phenomenon and
Hmm.
photographs, whatever it was. I have to send everybody out. And then when we're done and whatever, they would all be able to, come back in again. And it was always a lot of people. And at one point, a couple came. They were probably in their 30s, and the man brought his parents, and his parents were older. They were probably in maybe their 60s,
Oh.
somewhere around there. So they were older people. And the mother in particular was saying like, "Oh yeah, I'm very intuitive about these kinds of things," and da 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 da.
Sure.
And the house was, in my opinion, it was haunted by two human spirits, and one was a female who was kind of docile and kind of overprotective of the kids, and she was not a problem at all, but the male in the house was a problem, and this was the one that terrorized not only the people that were living there, but also past residents, people that were living there. They would hear him walking all around the porch, dragging his foot. He sounded like he was carrying something. He would yell and scream at people. He was a very, very active presence there, but he was also kind of mean. He did not
Yeah.
like the interaction. So, and we thought that for some reason we thought that they were husband and wife, and or we just thought that spirit was abusive in life.
Hmm.
It was just this impression that we got, and we didn't document it or anything. It was just kind of something that we just thought about based on everything. And I want to add too is that years and years and years ago, it was the slave quarters to a plantation home
Yeah,
Oh.
that could do
many,
it.
many, many years ago. So, anyways, the next day, actually, no, it was a Saturday night I investigated. Monday, I got contact from the man who was the guest of the house, the younger guy, whose parents were there, and he said something happened to my mother. Something happened to my mother, and he
Oh.
was really kind of stunned by this. And I said, "What happened?" He said, "She's covered in bruises."
Oh
Ooh,
no.
And
wow.
I said, "What happened?" And he sent me the pictures. And this was a frail, older woman. and her whole biceps all over here were bruised.
Oh,
And it looked just like somebody grabbed her by the arm and shook her
oh,
like an
geez.
abusive husband would, or a spouse or something.
Right.
And they sent me the pictures, and she had them on both of her arms, and it just looked like somebody grabbed her and shook her.
Oh man.
And that's when I first realized how dangerous these things can be.
Yeah.
And I wrote an article. I was blogging at the time, and I wrote an article about it. About house guests on investigations,
Mm-hmm.
and I would call that my first triggering, because that woman actually sent me an email afterwards, and she just went off on me. Just, I was invited there. I was an invited guest in that house. You have no right to say I didn't deserve to be. And I just said, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that sometimes when people are there, can get hurt
Yes.
when we're investigating,
Yeah.
and that happened to you.
Right.
And she just couldn't get it like that. But that was the first time that I really started to realize that there was more to this than the kicks and giggles that a lot of people have when they go on these things. And I was fortunate to have that experience early, so I was able to start taking this seriously from the very beginning.
Wow.
With it.
That's
And
intense.
that was a big one.
That
That
is
was
a
actually
big
a
one.
big one.
I tell you what, that's incredible. But you're right. It's not a spectator sport. There are real risks involved, and I appreciate exactly what you're saying. But we're gonna go to our first break of the night, ladies and gentlemen. So just hold on to your hats, and we'll be back with we got another hour and a half with Al as our guest / captive.
And it's only started.
We've just started, so we're gonna get in further down the rabbit hole. Thank you very much. I'm just kind of taking the plugs. But obviously you can see why I love talking to Al so much. It's very thoughtful. It's very insightful.
Right.
This is obviously the result of years of not only hard work and investigation, but also research. And I love that part of it. I think there's not enough of that because we get a fast food mentality with paranormal investigating. But
right.
hang on, ladies and gentlemen. We will be right back. What's that?
That's awesome.
Oh.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back with more of tonight's show, so don't go away. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back at it here on the Paranormal Portal. Obviously, it's going to be an epic rest of the night because it's been an epic first half hour for sure. So, Don, how you doing?
Doing good. I need to get back, on track. I need to stop playing with my phone and try and take this stupid picture because my camera is not working right on it. So anyhow,
Okay, well,
but I'm just trying to post a picture of my awesome
your awesome
cuff.
wristband.
Its cuff is awesome.
Yeah, it is really awesome. And our special guest tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is Mr. Tyus, who is author of Project Rabbit Hole and just a wonderful, wonderfully intelligent person, and obviously a very knowledgeable researcher and former investigator. So, Al, it's great. I love interviewing you, and the reason why is because you make it so easy for
It's
me.
so simple.
Thanks.
I
Thanks.
love it.
It's funny. As I'm talking to you, my cat is totally wanting my attention right now. And I apologize for that, but he keeps
That's
seeing
all right.
the paw come up and stroke my arm. He's he's actually completely blind, so he's more of a touch sense cat.
Oh.
And I'm watching the chat in here, and I'm just telling you guys, I am Uranian Rabbit in the chat,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
just saying hi, and most people are just kind of like, whatever. But it's kind of fun to see everybody. Anyways, yeah, it's funny because I was just as I was just talking, I think both my sister and my uncle are watching tonight, and
Excellent.
I've kind of it's kind of neat though because we're my sister and my uncle are the same age, and they're both 2 years older than me, and so we're all very close in age, and we've all had weird experiences, and when we get together and we talk about our experiences, we're all kind of like, it's a really good thing that we all kind of have each other because everybody else would think that we're really kind of nuts, so
Yeah.
that's kind of the good thing about it. I actually wrote about how in my book how my sister actually had a visit from the Hat Man,
Oh,
and how that really kind of freaked her out. And my sister's a type of person to not embrace this kind of stuff. She's just kind of the opposite of me with it, and yet she has like these weird experiences as well. And she and I still talk about when we were kids and we saw a basketball in our bedroom go up in the air and bounce across the room by itself, completely untouched.
Wow.
So we've always kind of had weird things happen in various ways. So it's actually kind of cool with that. But the book talks about a lot of these kinds of experiences, and I talk about hauntings, but I only talk about them as I always feel like if somebody is a paranormal investigator, they reach a crossroads in their career, and that crossroads is usually almost like a triple fork like that, because on one hand it's kind of like, this is all stupid. I never had an experience. I'm bored. I'm sitting here. I'm tired of sitting up against a washing machine for 3 hours waiting for something to happen in this basement. I hate this place. I hate my life. I'm done. And they don't come back again. There's tons of people like that. They just go in it with utter disappointment. Then there are the ones that have something happen, and they're so freaked out by it, they just are kind of like, I never knew this was real. I don't like it. I'm leaving, and I'm never coming back, and I don't want to talk about it, and they're gone.
Right.
And then there's a third person, and with the third person, they have something happen, and they stop and they think like, I just had something happen to me that I'm never going to be able to explain. It changed my life, and I know I'm at a crossroads, so I'm going to move ahead and see what's further down the rabbit hole. So I kind of go from there with it. And once you reach that point, it's almost like a point of no return, because even if you leave the whole paranormal world, you're still going to have experiences and things happen and various things like that. you're always going to kind of have that if you become one of those people. And I've become one of those people. No matter how much I distance myself from this stuff, I still have, kind of weird experiences. And I even wrote in my book towards the end of my ghost hunting part of this, a ghost could manifest right in front of me and I with the Holy Grail, and I would tell it where to stick it and walk off, because I just got to the point where I just got so sick of ghosts. I just got sick of them.
Sure.
Like that, and not only did I get sick of them, but I got sick of the way that people were treating these things like this, and I just got really, and I know that may sound weird for a lot of people to say that, but it's true. I lived in a townhouse before I moved into the place I'm living now. I lived in this old townhouse that was built in the early 40s. And the houses were built to support the factories for the war effort during World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And after the war, a bunch of the people that were the factory workers moved into these houses and lived there forever. And when I moved into my house, I had a neighbor like that. She was in her 90s. She was been there since the very beginning. And this woman drove me crazy because she was just a pain neighbor. Just one of those difficult neighbors to deal with. He's making noise. It was one of those,
get off my
one
lawn.
of those people. She's one of those people. Yeah, I swear he stole my tomatoes. One of those. So, and then she died. But what happened was with it is I had 2 bedrooms upstairs in my townhouse, and I was up in my bedroom, and all of a sudden I heard, and I knew that unit was vacant because it was right after she died, and all of a sudden I heard footsteps walking around in my second bedroom, which was my office. And I heard the sound of somebody rummaging through things.
Ooh.
So I got up and I walked in there and I just said, "You are dead and you were a pain in the ass. You can haunt all you want next door, but you never come into this damn house again."
Right.
And I never had another experience after that. It was done. But a young couple moved into the house next door, and every single night their baby freaked out.
Aw.
And I just had this thought, like, they put the nursery in that woman's bedroom, and she's probably hovering over the crib like, "Ah!"
Oh, yeah.
And that's why the baby is completely freaking out like that. And I thought to myself, should I have a word with them?
Yeah.
And then I was kind of like, no. And I just
Probably
kind
best.
of left it like that, because that was when I was at that point where I couldn't stand any of this stuff. But that's just what I feel about hauntings, is that a lot of them, they need to like figure it out and cross over and do whatever they need to do. And there are so many other very interesting entities out there that go way beyond ghosts that we encounter
Mm-hmm.
if we investigate. If people would just stop and think, maybe it's not a ghost, maybe it's something else. And if they start thinking like that, they can give the right precautions to do it. There's somebody in here that's going, Al, come on, man. No, it's true. Tighten up. It's all true.
Yeah.
So, but you can have that. You have that, and it's kind of funny when people are like that, because when people say like, "Oh, I don't believe in ghosts," and everybody goes, "Oh, you need to become more open-minded about things." And then when you say like, "Yeah, I believe in ghosts, but I also see that there's evidence for jinn and elementals and this, that, and the other thing," they go, "You're weird." It's like the same thing that happens when somebody who says they don't believe in ghosts at all,
Right. Well,
So it's actually kind of funny.
It's
when,
funny
that works like that.
it is, and it's funny because some people think everything's a demon,
Right.
and then
That's the other thing. That's the other thing with it. And the thing about it is, not only that, when you have these entities, you have to start to ask yourself why they're here. Like why they're here and how they got there. And well, if you ask that question, you might have some really mind-blowing answers to that question. Uh, a couple of things that came in mind with it, and one is I there are a couple of thoughts. They both kind of like went into my head at the same time.
Okay.
You know, I'm in the an area where there is a lot of military. There's a lot of law enforcement. I'm in the center of government here, so there are people all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Not only are they all in this area, they're all in this building.
Uh-huh.
So you have a lot of different types of people when it comes to this. And I got a call one time. I got an email from a guy, and he was a high ranker in the military. I'm not going to say anything more about
Sure.
that, but he was, and I always promised him, like, yeah, you have my complete, confidence with it. And he was telling me, like, he was from the islands originally, and he had always had some sort of a mediumistic element to him
Mm-hmm.
with it. Like he was always able to pick up on well, for him it was ghosts. For him, he was always able to pick up on ghosts and that. And he just said, I always know my mother's around, and I know this and that and everything, and that. And he was talking to me about this, but he just said, but something has just happened recently.
Oh.
And I said, what's going on? And he said, the floodgates opened up. They're all over my house.
Oh.
There's at least 11 of them in here, and I don't know where they're coming from. They're not part of this house. They're driving me crazy. I can't sleep. They're all over the place. My son has this ability. He's freaked out by the whole thing.
Wow.
I really, really need your help with this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, okay. So I sent the team over there, and there was a lot of things going on there. And the guy that I sent over was one of the few really, really, I'm going to sound a little critical about mediums, but he was a really good medium and one of the few that I worked with who was spot on with a
Sure.
lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I never told him anything before he went there. And he just said, that place was infested, but they all seem to be like humans. I don't know what's going on, but he cleared a couple of them out. We actually got a picture of a little girl's face when we went there, and he made contact with her because she was there because she didn't get the 9 days of prayer that Latina children get when they die.
Oh.
And according to this, she didn't even know why she was there. Neither did any of the other ones. So we did our best to clear it out, and he had to do the research on his own with this to find out what was going on. And it turned out that he had a sister. They had a follow over some land, and she was practicing Santeria.
Oh.
And she was sending these things to his house constantly.
Oh, man.
And when he found out about it, that's when he was able to stop it.
Oh.
See, there's the whole thing about this is that people talk about this stuff, and they always want to say, like, oh, yeah, science, science, science. And science is only going to get you so far because these things don't operate by our established laws of science.
Right. Right.
That's something that people don't quite understand. If they're interdimensional, for example, they have their own laws and their own dimension, and they don't abide by ours.
Right.
So they can probably be able to do things that we simply don't understand as a result of that. In other words, you can't use science. Obviously, if something's floating around the room, they don't have our concept of gravity somehow. We don't know how or why that happens, but it's very hard for us to put our science onto them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's impossible to follow the scientific method for this. When you test, hypothesize, test, retest, repeat.
Right.
And that stuff, it's impossible to do because there's no consistency with any of it.
Right.
So you have to kind of look into the metaphysics of what's going on as well. And if you're truly in it to help people, you will leave no stone unturned.
Right.
You'll take what you want, and if it doesn't make sense or whatever like that, and a lot of it won't, then you just kind of leave that. But you have to have that with it. And you also have to understand that there is a very dangerous element to this as well. And a lot of people just don't seem to get that. I had a case one time where I worked with a jinn that was sexually attacking a woman,
Oh wow.
and the Muslim community would not help her. We got called in to do what we could with it, and I felt bad because it was the first time I ever worked with a jinn.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to find out like what was going on, and we managed to get it so it wouldn't come to her when she was sleeping, and it was just the best that we could do because believe me, those things are very powerful.
Oh yeah.
And they're also intergenerational. If you take off a jinn, that jinn is not going to be angry at you. They're going to be angry at your kid, your grandkid, and God knows how many down the line. And that's what happened to this woman. It was an intergenerational jinn that harassed people all the way up her family line like that. And she was the next target. And I felt terrible about that because
Yeah.
it was something that was very, very hard to deal with because jinn are not demons.
Right.
That's something really important to say like that. Jinn are not demons. Jinn have the concept of free will. Jinn do both good things and bad things. A jinn can choose to help somebody or hurt them.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of jinns don't care about us at all, whilst the demon is naturally antagonistic towards us.
Good point. Yeah.
So jinn are different. And this country and this world is changing. We have a lot of different migrations coming in. We have new people coming in from other areas. And with that coming, I can guarantee any paranormal investigator is going to get a call one time and they're going to have a Muslim family and it's going to be somebody saying, I have a jinn. Can you help me?
Wow. So you think
That's going to happen.
you think that these entities are primarily regional then, and just through the course of people emigrating and migrating to different countries, they bring them with them, or do you think that there's a jinn counterpart in every part of the world? It's just a matter of semantics that over in the Middle East they're known as the jinn, but are they known as something else in other regions? Because, like, for instance, the Yowie, the Bigfoot, the Sasquatch, the skunk ape, the grassman, the Yeren, there's this similar phenomena all over the globe. It's just got all these different identifiers. So is that the same for the jinn, or do you think that they are specifically relevant and manifest in Muslim society?
No, they don't manifest solely in Muslim society,
Okay.
but they primarily have their characteristics within Islam because it's kind of like you have all these different types of beings, and they're the ones that adapted towards Islam because that was the region that happened to go Islamic.
Okay.
They existed long before Islam did,
Oh, sure.
and so if you think about it, like in Ireland, they became the little people. In Scotland, they became the Tuatha De Lethan, and they kind of characterize themselves into what we kind of make them out to be and what they are kind of what they are, if that makes any sense. But I think jinn, are in a class of their own,
Okay.
but they're also they're very related to everything else. But what I do is I compartmentalize everything. I think everything is kind of different, and you have to figure out exactly what it is. And that's where a lot of people disagree with me because they just see everything as being like it's either a ghost or a demon, and that's what we're taught in our culture.
Sure.
It's either a ghost or a demon. But if you have something like, let's say it's an earth elemental, and I had one stuck in my apartment one time
Ooh,
many,
okay.
many years ago, and that thing wreaked havoc. You're going to treat it differently than you're going to treat it if it was a ghost, or if you're going to treat it if it was something else. You're gonna treat it differently because every one of them has different ways of approaching it like that. It's kind of like they're different species in a
Yeah.
sense like that. I kind of say they're all the same tree, but just different branches.
Okay.
I guess you could say with it. And we tend to just lump them all together like that. And we really don't know for sure, but we do know is that there seem to be all different ones, and they have the capability of doing different things. But if it is a jinn over in the Middle East would act very differently from a jinn in Ireland. or a jinn in South America or something like that. Now a Muslim would say they're all jinn. They all look and act kind of differently, but they're all jinn. Even in Islam, there aren't even any ghosts. If you go to a haunted place, it's not a ghost, it's a jinn.
Sure. Right.
They're all jinn. People die. They go to wherever they're going to go after they die. They don't hang around here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a jinn.
And that's true for a lot of Christian faiths too. There's no ghosts. There's only demons. So if you're experiencing something, it's a demon. It can't be a ghost because that's not how it works according to their faith. So you see that repeated many places around the world in many faiths.
So what I wanted to do was I wanted to figure this all out. So I have a chapter in my book, and it's called From Crook to Scythe. And what I did was I wanted to know where we first started figuring out why we believe what we do today. And I took it all the way back to the Egyptians. I took it back to the Egyptians who believed that the soul was comprised of the 7 compartments. And if you put 2 of those compartments together in a specific way, you wound up with a ghost. And that would hang out for a while until it was had whatever its unfinished business was done. You didn't mess with it. You just kind of left it alone, and it would do what it needed to do, and then it would go to the afterlife when it was done.
Oh, okay.
And so you have to kind of look at how and why we believe the things that we do. And that's where it gets interesting, because you have the concept of ghosts in Greek society, ancient Greece. Why did they have that? Nobody ever escaped Hades, but they had ghosts.
Right. Good point.
So I go over that. And I go over how they did it and where they came from. The ancient Greeks always believed that ghosts came through magic, black magic. Somebody summoned them up like that. And I go into details about how they would do the ritual and that. And like if they needed to find a lost purse of money, for example, they would either go to an oracle or they would go to somebody who would summon up one of the death gods, and the death god would bring the ghost over to tell them where it was. And once they had that, they were done. It was done. They were put back to rest, go back to Hades, whatever like that. It was it. Like that. And I wrote about some really interesting ancient Greek ghost stories in that section as well. And then I took it and I went through the Romans and how they changed, and I thought about how the Roman Colosseum that has had probably thousands and thousands of people and animals bludgeoned and murdered and killed in all these weird sadistic ways. There's no record of any hauntings in the Colosseum.
That's interesting.
I went through all the data. I went through all the searching. There's no record of any ghosts. There's no record of anything. The only thing that people say that's in there are a lot of cats. But no record of that. So you have to think about this. When you think about ghosts in Europe, what do you think about? You think of the Tudor period and later, the Tower of London, and you kind of think later. You don't think about ancient Greek ghosts. You don't think about ancient Celtic ghosts. You don't think about ancient Roman ghosts. You don't think about the Gauls. You don't think about any of them except maybe the residuals on the battlefield. But I think even those manifest as later periods. It didn't really start to blow up until the English monarchy really became established, and then you have all the ghost stories that we still hear about today. So why is that? Why is it that people in Greece don't have visits from ancient Greek ghosts? Well, the reason why is because they're limited at their time. They don't stay around for 2,000 years. They have a limited amount of time to hang out here, and then when it's done, they go wherever they need to go.
That's interesting. That's a very interesting point.
That's my theory about it, like that.
Wow.
So that's what I say. Somebody just wrote in there, what about animal ghosts? And there are animal ghosts as well, and I think that they fall by the same thing, but they don't last as long as we do on this side with it, because they don't have like the same concept of unfinished business that we have.
Sure.
And that, but they, for one reason or another, based on whatever they have, sometimes they do stick around. I think that might be that case where they may stick around to make sure that their owner is okay or somebody they loved is okay, because those loved bonds are very, very strong.
Yeah.
Like that. You never hear of a ghost of a duck flying around in the pond,
I have
but you
not heard of
have
that.
the ghost of your beloved a dog or cat or something like that. And I think
Sure.
that might be those love bonds. But
You're right.
again, I'm not sure about
Okay.
that.
Well, we're going to go to our
But
second break, ladies and gentlemen. So hang on to your hat. The night is flying by. That's 1 hour already done. You can see how fast this goes. But don't go away. And remember, after the portal, to stick around for Paisley Wild, the spaces between, following the portal tonight. And then later on, Duke with World Bigfoot Radio on TFR Live tonight. So we're going to go take a break. Be right back. Don't go away.
Everybody likes to play their games. Everybody loves to place their bets. They don't understand the price I paid. They don't care to comprehend. Trace their lines upon my body, ripping scars across my heart. Raging anger boils inside me as their lies keep falling apart. But I'm not broken yet. I'm not broken yet. I'm not broken I am finished with my silence. I am not a stupid boy. No more breaking me with kindness. Just you dance upon my joy. Leading me with empty promise. You're just another fucking mess. Take another slice of my sanity. Just make sure that you're well fed. I'm not broken yet. I'm not broken yet. I'm not broken yet. I'm not broken
A nightmare from which they cannot wake. I can't see you, Mommy. Where are you? I've never sensed anything like it. Carol Ann is not like those she's with. They're attracted to the one thing about her that is different from themselves. Her life force. It is very strong. It gives off its own illumination. It is a light that implies life and memory of love and home and earthly pleasures. Something they desperately desire, but can't have anymore. Right now, she's the closest thing to that.
Poltergeists are usually associated with an individual. Hauntings seem to be connected with an area. A house, usually.
Poltergeist disturbances are of fairly short duration, perhaps a couple of months. Hauntings can go on for years.
And so can the Paranormal Portal, ladies and gentlemen. But we're back for hour number 2 is just beginning. We're getting into another full hour with Mr. Al Tyus here on the Portal, author of Project Rabbit Hole, and an excellent interview, as you can tell.
Awesome.
He just makes my job so easy. I just love it. I just got to kick back and I love listening to what he's got to say. Al, we are so honored to have you here. It's good to have a chance to sit down with you this way, too. It's a longer format than the podcast, so this is really great. So where are we going next, sir?
Pure Al.
All right,
Hope
let's
that
get to
didn't,
it.
Like, do a copyright violation or anything like that. But
Sponsored by Purell.
But there are a couple of things that I want to make sure I go over with the book too, because I was just talking to your audience there, and one of the things I go over are the gray aliens, and the other one that I go over is the concept of if anybody understands what a tulpa is, or an
Yes.
egregore, which is basically a thought form that eventually develops a life of its own. And there's a part of that that may end up being related to the dreaded coronavirus that I was talking about here, and that's very trippy stuff. So I may just have people save that for people who want to buy the book.
Okay.
But depends on Uranium Rabbit in chat, Black Tree.
Yeah.
So, but if we have time, I'll discuss a little bit about it like that, because there is a chapter in my book that's called "The Older Gods," and what's kind of going on now with the shifts in things changing so drastically. But anyways, I wrote a chapter in the book about World War II and how mediums are trying to gain information through some sort of extraterrestrial or interdimensional beings to create spaceships and weapons and various things like that. And the Nazis were really into this kind of stuff, and they appear to have developed some advanced technology that they never really could get off the ground, though, through mediumship and that kind of stuff. And this is what really got me to think about this. One of the things I said in a recent show, I said that with mediums, I said I completely understand mediums having the ability to make contact with other beings. I've had a limited capability of getting images and things like that from time to time myself.
Okay.
But I wouldn't call myself a medium. But you have to be very, very careful with what's on the end of that receiver.
Yeah.
And that's what I said that kind of offended a few people like that. Because the reason why I say that is because if you look throughout history, people have relied very, very heavily on whether it's a medium through or interpretation of oracles or a mystic or a prophet or a channeler or whatever it is. And the information goes one way and it seems like it's accurate. Yeah, this is great. I believe it's really something like that. And then all of a sudden something comes along and whether it's a prediction or prophecy or something, it completely falls flat. And once that falls flat, the medium loses all credibility. And that's interesting how that happens. And that brings me back to World War II. These mediums were these very, very attractive Nordic-looking women were channeling these extraterrestrials to gain technology. Now, you think about this. If the Germans were contacting highly advanced civilizations from another dimension or another galaxy and getting all this technological information, why did they lose?
Right.
So you have to think about that. They lost. Now, there could be three theories behind that. One is that the Allied powers also had those kinds of connections. Two is that there were never any mediums at all. The whole thing was just a myth. And three, whatever they were contacting deceived them.
Right.
Or weren't what they said that they were, and lied to them.
Yes.
So you have those three different ideas with it. So if you have this entire group that are putting all their reliability on these beings that they claim are these descended masters, as they call them, and they lost the war, then are they really that reliable?
Right.
If we were to contact them. So after the war, everything just changed with everything. And the reason why everything changed is because we developed nuclear power and we dropped the bomb. And the nuclear bomb, what I believe is, and this is one of my controversial theories, but what I believe is that when nuclear power was discovered, and that impact of dropping nuclear bombs and having such an amazing weapon and such an amazing new energy for us, that is what elevated what we know now as the gray alien.
Oh.
Now, the reason why I say that is because if you look at what the gray alien does, they paralyze people. Have paralysis. They come into their homes, they abduct them, they experiment on them, they impregnate women, they steal sperm from men, they do all these awful things, and most people have very, very traumatic experiences from them. And a lot of times they have time flips and various things like that. So what does that describe? Well, you take that before we drop the bombs, that describes the fairy folk. It describes nature spirits. It describes anything like that. And if you notice with gray aliens, most of the time, they show up in the woods. A lot of times you hear about them, they're either like on the trail of woods or they're around woods. And they're not usually associated with what we see in the sky. Like when people have experiences with gray aliens, they really have experience of actually seeing the spaceship itself. In fact, I don't think there's ever been a documented case where people have witnessed a spaceship and a gray alien at the same time. Now, the only time that they had spaceships and the occupants of the spaceships were the Barney and Betty Hill case in 1961.
Right.
Now, they had that, but when they described those beings were not the gray aliens that we see now. They look similar, but they were different.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking specifically about those little big-headed, bug-eyed, 3-foot tall little guys that scientifically shouldn't exist.
Sure.
They can't. They have no sex organs. They cannot go to the bathroom, which means they can't eat. They have biologically, they can't possibly exist as we know biology. With it, everything has to eat, everything has to eliminate, and everything has to reproduce. They do none of those things.
Oh.
So, in fact, they don't even have any. From the descriptions of people say, they don't even have any orifices on their bodies. like that. They have a slit for a mouth and maybe like a couple little dents for a nose. And those almost look like masks when you think about it. That big head on that skinny body.
Right.
It almost looks like it's a helmet or a mask or something like that, if you think about it.
Yeah.
So, so now the reason why I say that is because I just think what happened was we have all of these other beings that were around in nature, like the jinn, like the fairy folk, like the Bogarts, like the Domovoy in Russia,
Right.
like all these different things like this, and then boom, we end up with these gray aliens that seem to have just kind of exploded after around the 1950s up to the 1960s. They just started showing up everywhere like that. I don't think there's ever been an alien abduction case with grays in the 1910s, 1920s, or anything like that. I don't believe that there were. They all seem to have happened by the majority after the war. So I think that they are the same things that the other things were, at least initially, but they were either an upgrade or a new one that came after the after we dropped the bomb.
That's
So
interesting.
that's where my theory kind of goes with that. So if you think about it, what was the big difference in the 50s and the 60s in our culture and our psyche? The big difference was we moved to the modern era. Everything started turning chrome. Everything started getting more technological. We started developing a lot more newer appliances and various things. And of course, we started work on the space program. And Sputnik was released in Russia. And space started coming on everybody's minds. So it's very possible that these things, whatever they are, started using what we have in our thought cycles and started manifesting as aliens
That's
and
interesting.
continue to do what they're doing.
Yeah.
So they're not space aliens at all. They're just an upgrade from whatever these other things were, whatever they were that were with us all the time. I don't believe that the Greys are aliens from another planet, Zeta Reticuli or whatever they are. I really don't. I think they are the same interdimensional creatures that have always been on this planet, but they were either upgraded or a new version of them
Yeah.
doing the same things. They're still bent on deception. You still can't trust them. And they still rule with fear. Now, I did an interesting analysis in my book with the Soviets, because what I did was I looked at all the Soviet alien abductions before the end of the Cold War. Now, we were very separated back then, and this is actually my background. I really am actually a military Cold War historian, so this was kind of a fun job. And I started looking at Jacques Vallée's research, who went over to the Soviet Union in the late 1980s and started interviewing alien abductees and people who saw spaceships and things like that. The Soviets did not see gray aliens. What the Soviets saw were mechanical-looking, weird types of almost mutant types of creatures. They had different eyes in different places. They had no heads. Some of them had other heads. Some of them were covered in hair. They all looked very different, but they always associated these things with spaceships. But they didn't see the gray aliens, and we did not see what they saw.
Right.
That were associated with the aliens. So what's the conclusion that I can draw with that is that since our cultures didn't interact, the same thing happened with their belief system because it was under the communist regime, and their stuff was a lot more analog, I guess, opposed to our digital. You could say like that. It was more clunky and kind of bulky and all that stuff. And their aliens were looking kind of clunky and bulky and kind of missing things and that weird stuff. Well, our alien looked really sophisticated and very advanced and everything. And so it's kind of the possibility that these were something else, and they put their our characteristics on them based on what we believe. And with the Russians, they had the exact same things happen. They would go out and leave food for them in certain places. And they actually said if you don't leave food for the space people, they're going to come and get you.
Oh.
And there's documented cases of that too, which again goes back to the the nature spirit, little people theory with that. And if you look at where this all happened, those seem to happen around small towns and wooded areas and those kinds of places that seem to associate around clusters of trees primarily. Now, I even spoke with and interviewed a guy that was abducted in my book. Okay. And I gave him my theories of what I think that they are, and he actually agreed with me on them. So I was kind of like, glad about that, somebody who had a direct experience, who had encounters with them and saw them several times too, verified my research. And again, when he saw them, again, they were out in the woods.
Yeah.
They seem to be out in the woods or out in nature, just like nature spirits would be. So it seems to make sense like that.
That's really cool. And I've never would have come to that conclusion on my own. But I'm absolutely compelled to think about that a lot more, because that's a very unique perspective on it. But it does make sense. It's pretty logically sound.
Yeah, it does seem to make sense with that. And when I started looking at this was something. It was kind of weird the way this happened, because when I was doing non-human entity training, I was buying all these weird little goofy things for to show my guys in my group. And I ended up with this pixie nightlight that you plugged in from like the 1950s or something like that, and it had these amber eyes.
Ooh.
And I plugged in, I just went, holy crap, it's an alien. And I just started looking at that, and I went, is there a connection between these? And that's when I started the research with it, was through that little pixie nightlight that's down in my storage unit somewhere that won't come up here. So it kind of went from there. So this is what I'm doing with the book. I'm looking at the patterns. I'm looking at what's alike, what's different. And the biggest thing that I'm looking at with this is how you're not going to get the information you're looking for. Now, that's the other thing that people see as controversial, because every investigator out there think that they're going to find they're going to get the brass ring.
Yeah.
They're going to get the Holy Grail.
Sure.
And they're going to find the evidence that's so compelling that they're going to win Randy's $51 million challenge, or they're going to have something that's going to completely like blow away the scientific community. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It hasn't happened in 2,000 years. It's not going to happen in our lifetime. And we know as much about these things as the ancient Greeks did.
Yeah.
Now, really, we haven't even gone as far as the ancient Greeks. So you have the ancient Greeks. The only difference is with the ancient Greeks, they would have their gods associated with these kinds of things. Now we have our God associated with these kinds of things, if it's demonic or something like that.
Sure.
So you have different concepts, meaning like in ancient world, they would go to an oracle, and the oracle would channel the god Apollo and come out with some sort of advice or something that actually came from the god Apollo. Nowadays you have, and then in the 1800s, you would have somebody who did the same thing to go in trance, but now it wasn't Apollo. Now it was some drunk guy who died 30 years ago in a basement who was haunting it, who seems to have some sort of an idea of what's going on through knocks and bangs and the spiritualist movement. And then that kind of faltered. And now you have a channeler who's channeling something from like Zeta Reticuli or the Pilates or whatever dimension they're coming from with it. So the person does the same thing, but whatever they're making contact with always seems to change.
So the goalposts keep moving, yeah?
The goalposts keep moving. And the other part of it is that these things love to stay one step ahead of us. Whatever they are, they're very, very smart. I lump them all together with a euphemism. I just call them our elusive friends so they don't get angry at me. But they're very smart. And I wrote up a section on the Skinwalker Ranch and how the Skinwalker Ranch had some of the best scientists and best equipment in the country to investigate that place that was teeming with paranormal activity in the most amazing ways, with disappearances and poltergeist activity and things showing up on the property and weird visions and all these things that happened. And they had a billionaire send a whole team of bona fide scientists all to that place to live on that ranch in Utah. They didn't pick up anything compelling.
Wow.
Why did that happen? Why did that happen? Because they would have a camera here. The activity would happen right on the edge of the camera. They moved the camera on the activity, it would stop. And that's what they do. The very first part of my book talks about this guy who caught on tape a ghost walking across a room in a house in Virginia that he investigated. These were VHS tapes, of course, and those were very tricky back then. They caught it. They saw it on the monitor. When they played it back, it was just snow.
Jeez. Yeah, that's frustrating.
The possibility there was like that they screwed up, but they knew what they were doing because everything else came up.
Yeah.
But that part, no.
Yep.
It's like in the movie Beetlejuice when the caseworker tells the ghosts, you don't allow yourself to be photographed. And there's some reason like that something always seems to happen.
There's some rule
like that because whenever you do, but if you see like there's things on YouTube and things like that look like they're bona fide ghost videos or things like that. There are always things that happen when people aren't expecting it.
Yeah.
Or they're not looking for them.
Yep.
You'll have a wedding picture and there'll be some freaky thing in behind the guests. You'll have some little kid playing by their play table and something will scoot across behind them.
Yeah.
You'll have these things happen and it was never expected or intended to be a paranormal thing. And when the people play it back, they're completely freaked out.
Right.
So I have a section in my book where I didn't put in the YouTube URLs, but I put in the keywords that people can type in so they can see these for themselves on how these were just people kind of living their lives and doing whatever like that. And then something really freaky happens to them. And they're people who have never had any encounters or any experience or any interest in this kind of stuff. And something just seems to happen to them.
Yeah.
I go on this a YouTube channel called Slapped Ham, and they have a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see that for yourself that that kind of happens like that. And usually, not always, but usually that's how it happens. It catches us off guard. A bunch of paranormal investigators are going to go into a place. Chances are they're not going to get any activity. The activity is going to happen at 3 a.m. to the client after everybody's gone. Right. And they're going to be freaking out at that time because whatever's there is just waiting in the wings for it. They're not going to show themselves.
Yeah. And then there also seems to be this rebound effect too with after investigations. Like there's heightened activity after the investigation is over for a period of time. And that, I don't know if that's... is that like karma for the people? Like, would you bring them into the house? So I'm going to get you now,
I think that happens because when the investigators go in, they steer everything up.
Yeah, I think you're
because they go in and they go into places. Sorry to cut you off.
No, it's fine.
They go to places in the house where the people don't go, where things tend to hide because an entity, regardless of what type of entity it is, they like to confine themselves into small enclosed places. Attics, basements, closets, garages, places that are kind of less frequented by the living, but close enough to the living where they can kind of like get their energy and all that stuff. So it's all there, but they tend to avoid those places. And when the investigators go in, they go into all those places. So a lot of times the entity will either kind of dart around or whatever like that, or it will kind of go dormant for a while. And then after the investigator leaves, everything is kind of crazy. And I guess I could say, it's like if you have a cat, for example,
Uh-huh.
you have guests.
Holy
You have
shit.
guests over.
Yeah.
The cat runs under the bed.
Yeah.
The guests leave. The cat's all over the place.
Yeah. Good point.
They're kind of like that, I guess you can say. With it,
That's
you know, they just tend to not hang around when the attention is on them. They don't
Yeah.
like the it's all on their terms.
Exactly. And just
It's all
hold on.
on their terms. The whole thing. We're at their mercy if we want to have anything from them. We're at their mercy. It's all their terms and their rules.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to go to our last break, ladies and
Wow.
gentlemen. It's gone that quickly,
Wow.
and you could see we could
Wow.
do 5 hours with Al and never run out of something to say. This is just like last night. But remember, after the portal on TFR Live, stick around for the Paisley Wild coming up with the Spaces Between.
And
She
then-
simulcasts on her own YouTube channel on youtube.com, the Spaces Between, and then stick around for the Duke. World Bigfoot Radio will be taking over TFRlive.com.
I guess he has Caveman on again.
Caveman is going to be his guest on tonight's show. Go over there to youtube.com/chat. We're going to go to break. Don't go away. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Last 30 minutes of the show, minutes or how 25 minutes and 26 minutes, I guess is what it works out to. But the last 26 minutes of the show, and we are cooking through the night. It's been an excellent journey. And our special guest tonight, of course, is author Al Tyus, who is with us. And Al, I got to tell you, I like the idea that not only are you participating here on the show, but you're also in the chat room and engaging the listeners. I really, that's awesome, brother. I don't, very rarely does that happen. Yeah.
You got Cha-Cha in there, and she looks like she's a lot of fun, and Mongolian Monster, and
yeah,
Cha-Cha again, and yes, it's got a good time.
Yeah, it's pretty much.
I just like saying Cha-Cha.
Yeah, it's usually Cha-Cha, a couple people, Cha-Cha, 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 and then a couple people more.
Yeah. That is awesome. So we are
What was that thing in Arrested Development? Cha-chi, cha-chi. Oh, never mind.
No, it's just been a whirlwind of discussion tonight, and it's great. I mean, you, as with the podcast, you bring such a unique viewpoint and knowledge to the table. It's just a pleasure, and you just go. I mean, you're just excited about the information, and that's fun to listen to you.
It's very, very interesting, and what you also have to do is you have to realize that the research that I'm doing is very, very cutting edge, and I looked at the past, but I'm looking at now, because right now what we have going on is like the internet changed everything.
Yes.
Sure.
And what happened is now, though, is that all you have to do is type in a search engine, type in something like 3 a.m. challenge.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you'll see teenagers going to graveyards with Ouija boards at 3 a.m. for likes and subscribes. They'll order these weird things offline and mess with online, like divot boxes or cursed items or whatever like that.
Yeah.
And they will do that, and they will say, "I'll open it up for likes and subscribes," and they do all these things, and some of it is probably staged or hoax or whatever like that. But I think some of it that people are really going that crazy just to get likes and subscriptions, and they're using this kind of stuff for that, and it's becoming very dangerous.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, my page just froze up on here. So I wonder if I reboot it,
just refresh it.
Problem.
Yeah.
Just refresh this page.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm like afraid to touch anything. Okay. So so that's a part of it. But what I also want to talk about is talking about modern things. Is there are also new ideas about religion going on, and there were also new cults going on, and new ways of contacting spirits that are going on too. And this is the really, really, as if it wasn't weird enough, this is some of the really weird stuff that's going on now, is that people are actually figuring out how to do witchcraft and magic and various things like that through the internet. And backing up a little bit with it, I do have a story before the internet, and it's going to kind of segue into this.
Sure.
Years ago, I investigated a very haunted plantation home in Southern Virginia. And this was one of I'm not a type of person that scares easily.
Right.
I'm really not, unless I'm like at a really high building and then I freak out. But most time I'm not scared of this kind of stuff that much.
Right.
But I went to this this plantation home, and it was run by these 3 men, and one of them called himself a shaman, and I understand like shamanism and those kinds of things. And at first I didn't think much of it. And when I walked into that house, it was like, oh my God, this place is so haunted. You just feel the energy of it, like kind of hit you when you walk in. And I was nervous because I felt like I was in danger from that place. And then the guy took me and the guy I was with, who was actually a police officer. We went upstairs, and the shaman opened up his nightstand drawer and pulled something out, all wrapped up in black.
Oh.
And he pulled it out, and it was a bone.
Oh.
And he holds the bone up, and the guy I was with asked me, what kind of a bone is that? And he took the bone and he put it up against my partner's thigh.
Mm.
And he said, it's a femur.
Oh.
It's a human femur.
Yeah.
A human femur. And he's like, I use a human femur for shamanic rituals. And I was kind of like, that's a little disturbing.
Yeah.
You know, and I was trying to hide my sheer panic. You know,
Yeah.
so when we were leaving, the shaman came to me and he took my hand and put my palm out, and he did this weird thing to my palm, and he said, "Now you'll be careful going home tonight."
Uh-oh.
And then he just started laughing and he walked off, and that was it.
Jeez.
So we're driving back, and I start getting angry, irrationally angry. Like, why am I angry? Like, I was getting angry at everything. It was just this rage started coming out like this, and it was just happening, and I wasn't feeling like myself with this. And I went home, and for a couple of days, I still didn't feel like myself. And I ended up doing actually what I did at the time was I went to my Catholic faith, and I did a couple of rosaries, and I read some psalms. I did a few other things like that, and I started to feel better with that. And then I got sick. And I mean, I got sick with like a flu that I've never got before. It was terrible. It was over Thanksgiving weekend. I'll never forget it. So I was completely sick. And then when I started to recover, I went back to work, and I got an email from this guy. And he said, heard you were sick. And he said, I tried to send one of the occupants of my plantation, who was a cook, to you home with you to make you some chicken soup. And next thing you know, he's back here in my place. You must have said a counter prayer. Now, why would you do something like that?
Oh, that's not creepy.
And that was what made me realize that there is true things that happen, magic and witchcraft and the occult.
Yeah.
That guy was one that convinced me of that with it. And I always kept that with me. And I started to really research the occult and how that works and all these different things. And does anybody in the chat, do you know what a sigil is? Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard of a sigil, S-I-G-I-L? You probably, if you watch Supernatural, you would know what they are. Like that. They're too busy like flirting with each other and stuff. Black Tree knows what it is.
Yes, sure.
Anyways, a sigil is basically in the spirit world, everything has their own signature, which is a symbol. And that symbol is recognized as a particular entity in a lot of ways. For example, all the angels have them, and people use them as protection and talismans and things like that. They all have their special, it's almost like a signature for them. It's this particular symbol like that. And the way that we know is if you have the sigil of a entity like a demon, you can control it. If you could properly do the rituals correctly, you can actually control the demon by activating the sigil. Now, why do I say that? Because what's going on now with people is they're actually starting to figure out how to do this in the internet by putting a sigil in a meme and sending the meme out into cyberspace. Now, I know that may sound odd at first like that, but y'all remember the the 2016 election, and not to get into any political controversies, that's not my intention, but you started seeing that green frog, Pepe, going all over the place with that, the Pepe the frog. And that was actually a symbol of the Egyptian god Kek, and there's actually a cult to that god. And the people that originated that actually said that they have a cult to the god Kek, and they're making these various frog things to send out so that when people see them, they get all triggered and ticked off and everything, and they actually feed the sigil, and then it actually increases the power of the entity behind it. And the whole intention of this Egyptian god Kek is pure chaos. And what these people were doing on these message boards like 4chan and things like that, they said they're going to experiment with these occult objects and put them into the internet to see if they affect things. And that, it's oddly enough, they actually believe that that's why Trump won the election, because if you look at what was going on with the election, as soon as Hillary Clinton addressed that frog meme, she started getting sick. She started fainting. She started falling over. And really bad things started happening to her that aren't happening now. They're all happening during the election like that. And it was almost like she was cursed. Meanwhile, these guys are laughing, saying that they actually used those sigils to curse her. And it was kind of a bizarre thing that was all kind of falling together like that. Now, with that being said, they tried that again with the Ebola virus in Africa. They sent some sigils out of it looked like an anime girl dressed as a nurse, and we're holding a skull that was saying that you have been visited by Ebola-chan. If you forward this picture, you will get hit with Ebola or something crazy like that. Now, what happened was those memes were hitting Africa, and it was flipping out people in Africa because they actually thought there was a cult that was being created for this Ebola-chan like that as a goddess. And they actually were so freaked out about it, they stopped going to white doctors, and the Ebola-chan was actually Ebola was actually increasing over there due to that meme. So in a sense, the magic ritual behind that was actually working, because they sent this almost like an egregiory form out in the form of an anime girl to go after these people, and they were getting Ebola.
Wow. That's crazy.
So now the weird thing about this is that right around the time when the coronavirus broke out, they did it again, and this time they made a image of a young Japanese girl holding a bowl of bat soup and the Chinese flag, and basically and a bottle of Corona, and they were calling her a Corona-chan.
Really?
Now, I started watching this. In fact, I'm a bit of I'm not a good artist at all, but I actually made a sculpture of this as a demonstration of it. Here, if you can see here.
Oh, sure.
I may give this to you, Brent. It's actually the image of Corona-chan. She wears a red dress, holds the Chinese flag, and she has the virus on top of her head.
Oh, geez.
Like this. I love making props like this. I just do this
cool.
with a lot of stuff. Anyways, and she holds a bottle of Corona. So now this thing started out as these really crude memes that were going around on different social media outlets.
Mm-hmm.
Then what started happening was the virus started breaking out of China. And then the memes started getting a lot more sophisticated and evolved. And now there actually is a death cult called the Corona-chan death cult, where people are making shrines to this thing and lighting candles to it and all this stuff. And as they're doing this, the virus is spreading.
Sure.
So there actually could be an occult element to this, because when people see the image of Corona-chan, if they know what it is, they freak out. If they freak out, they feed the image, they feed the sigil.
Wow.
And as a result of that, it gains more power. And now it's actually increasing, and more people are getting sick. It's the strangest thing I've ever seen with it.
That is intense.
Now, one of the reasons why I talk about this too is because now they're putting her image in the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. They have her with the other one, Ebola-Chan. They're putting her up as the Grim Reaper. And now the reason why I talk about this too is because during the bubonic plague, people were seeing beings of the Grim Reaper. People were actually seeing a figure in black walking around with a Sith.
Sure.
And when they saw that, it was really freaking them out like that because they were they knew when that was happening that the plague was coming. This whatever this is, this Corona-Chan, I believe could either be a tulpa, like a thought form they're activating into doing this kind of stuff, or they're reaching into the astral world and pulling something out that could be really, really bad, that could really hurt us.
Wow.
Like that. But one of two things happening. But the thing about this is, now people during the bubonic plague believed that death was right at their door, and they actually believed in a personification of death. And they started seeing death
Sure.
himself. People are seeing this Japanese anime being as a manifestation of death. And now this thing is developing its own cult.
Yes.
So this is where I'm saying that these things have a metaphysical element to them.
Sure.
And it could just be psychological, but there's something really interesting that is happening with this in relation to this virus.
Right.
And there could be a magical element that's associated with it. And the research I'm coming up with, I sent you my report on that, Brent. I don't know if you were able to read it, but I just found it to be very interesting because if you look at our history, a lot of times when plagues and bad things like that have outbreaks, there are these weird omen things that seem to be either supernatural or occult related that come before they do.
Sure.
And it's that happening again.
Yeah.
And that's what I find the most interesting with this concept of it,
Well,
like this,
and
is that it's becoming a cult.
And we see that also in manifest in things like Slender Man and the Momo thing that was going around. They created, and energy follows intention. So as people are projecting this fear, I suppose we do manifest a consciousness to it. And, that makes perfect sense to me that, fear can project into something of its own. And that, that's incredibly powerful because I think we do fundamentally manifest our reality. And so there you go.
So the question is that can we now? So I was thinking to myself, like for example, like let's say somebody buys a house where people were killed in it, and there's nothing wrong with this place. Whoever's killed in there, they crossed over, they're long gone, whatever, like that. But if they believe enough that the house is haunted, will they start getting activity?
Right.
Now, that's the whole thing about it, is how much of this falls together with our belief actually manifesting something like that. And now the big thing that's kind of like the contrast to this, if that's the case, then people would probably be seeing Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy, because we have millions and millions of kids that believe in those, and who has the biggest faith in something than a little kid.
Sure.
But that doesn't happen.
It kind of does. I kind of got an experience of my own of seeing.
Really?
Basically, I was coming to terms with the idea that maybe Santa wasn't real, and I was staying at a friend's house. Right. And I've shared the story on the show before, but just to paraphrase it quickly, the headboard of his bed was it was a big, oversized bed, and it was we just both slept in it because we were little. But we were sitting there talking about, do you think Santa's real? And we really wanted to believe, but we were kind of getting to the point where we weren't really sure, and we're having that struggle. And there was a small window above his headboard that had a street light outside that would shine in. And on his footboard was a projection of the curtains and the window pane, but nothing else. And suddenly, this little elf head popped up, the silhouette of an elf head. and it wasn't there. And I turned around and looked out the window. There was nothing that should have caused that. And I looked and looked because I wasn't a stupid kid, and I couldn't find why that was projected on the footboard. But it was manifest there, I think, as a result of our struggle with this, and wanting so much to believe in it, that something manifests to create an affirmation for us.
Yeah, that actually kind of is. That could be a thought like that. That's why I think that might be a possibility with it.
Sure.
Like that. So I'm not really sure, but what I do know is that things are beginning to manifest more and more that have not existed before.
Absolutely.
Like the Hat Man, like Black-Eyed Children, these other weird things that Slender Man, but even though Slender Man came out as a game, but things just they constantly evolve, and I think they evolve with as our culture and our psyche evolves.
Right.
They kind of evolve like
Right.
that at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's what I kind of think happens with it. So I think that it might be a combination of our minds and their energetic fields kind of blending together like that into what we actually see. For example, if something is up in the air, our minds might put wings on it, so a fairy would have wings.
Right.
Or if it's like an elf, they may put boots on it, or something, because it makes more sense to our brain like that. It's kind of funny because I gotta tell this story before we end, because this is one of my favorite stories.
Sure.
The friend of mine that I had who was a medium, who had very, very mediumistic, he was also an army soldier. And he was stationed all over the place. And at one point, he was in Rock Creek Park, and very local to me, because his grandmother lived in a house right by the park. Again, you have that nature element to it. And she had like a closed-in porch, and him and a friend of his were sitting on the closed-in porch, and they look over, and they see this being sitting on a chair staring at, just sitting there, and it had like a very round face with a big huge grin on its face. And it almost sounded like it was like Sam from those Halloween movies, but this was long before those movies existed. And it just kind of sat there staring at them like that. And being the soldier he was, he threw a shoe at it. And he ended up, both of them ended up unconscious and woke up 2 or 3 hours later, and they had no recollection of any time. They just saw the shoe go in the air, looked like he was going to hit the thing, and then boom, they lost 2 hours of time. And that was kind of a mind-blowing story when I heard that, and I write about that in my book as well.
Wow.
So if you want to hear any more stories like this, and my concepts about these things and other things, check out Project Rabbit Hole. I hope you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, would you let people know how to stay in touch with you, brother? Because I know you've got some new fans in the making now. So
Contact Brent.
I'm going to be his personal secretary now.
Yeah. No, you can find me. Well, there's a Project Rabbit Hole page on Facebook. You could find me on there. I'm on here as Uranium Rabbit on YouTube. I'm not very active on YouTube. I don't have a lot of subscribers, so I subscribers. I post more videos talking about things. But you can find me on Facebook. I have Tyus on Facebook. You can contact me there. If you contact me on Facebook, you are expected to interact with me. I don't like collectors. There are so many people that go on there, and they add you, and then they never contact you or anything like that. They just it's like, look, I have this guy, and I'm like, look, I'm not part of a collection, And I say sup, how you doing, or whatever like that, and ignored. So then it's like, okay, you just got unfriended, But you can like my page, Project Rabbit Hole. You can contact me there too. Normally, I would say I would sell signed copies of Project Rabbit Hole, But the problem is right now is the post office that I go to, it's all shut down because of the dreaded virus.
Oh no. Okay.
See, I am grounded. I'm working from home for the rest of the month
Wow.
and possibly longer. And my post office is right where I work.
Oh.
And they basically barred us pretty much from going into the that area like that. And now I'm working from home at least until April 1st, so I might be going a little stir crazy.
Oh.
But I could do it, but it would be delayed, and I don't think that's fair to you all. But what I can do is I'll make an announcement on Project Rabbit Hole when I'm able to ship them out again, and then I could probably do it that way with it.
Perfect.
But if you see it on here, it looks like this. It's a cool purple copy, and the guy that did the cover, I love the cover of it. I just think he did a great job.
We got to go, brother.
With it.
Yeah.
And I thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I thought it was 11:56. I was going to ramble for 4 more minutes. But
That's it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on tonight's show. Thank you, Al, for being here. We love you all. Stick around for the Paisley Wild, the spaces between coming up next. We love you all. Be good, be kind, be nice. Taking care of each other, help each other out, find the magic in every day, and remember to laugh. Good night, everybody.
Good night.